Well, coronavirus also, of course, still highly present in Russia, approaching 5,000 deaths overall there. Vladimir Putin, though, were pressing ahead with his constitutional changes. They were delayed back in April, you'll remember, but now he's announced that Russia will vote on those changes on July the 1st. And joining me now is our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons. Rob, why is this coming now then, and why doesn't Putin just wait a bit longer?
Good questions. Yeah. Well, it's pretty momentous for Russia. These are the first constitutional changes since 1993. And Vladimir Putin is presenting them as all this sort of culmination of his presidency, allowing the state to mature, to develop politically, economically, and socially, before eventually he steps down. The reality, I think, though, is this is about power. It's about politics. Russia does not have a mechanism for the handover of power, and everybody in the Kremlin knows that in 2024, President Putin comes to the end of his second consecutive term, and under the present constitution, that means he has to stand down. For President Putin, it's not really so simple, but because there is no mechanism for passing power on in Russia, he knows that if he loses power, there's every chance that whoever succeeds him will be forced to build up his own power base inside Russia, and he could be the person who loses out as a consequence. That, I think, is essentially what it's all about. It's about power and what happens once President Putin goes. These changes will allow him to stay on effectively 2 consecutive terms up to 2036, by which time he'll be 83 years old. He's leaving nothing to chance. The vote's going to take place on July the 1st, but early voting will start on June the 25th. That's just one day after the postponed 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War celebrations. Massive parade in Moscow. Patriotic feelings will be high, and he will be calculating that he will ride on a wave of populism and patriotism and get a big vote in his favor.
Riding on a wave of coronavirus as well there, Rob. I mean, what's the messaging on the attitudes to coronavirus? Because it is a bit confusing, isn't it? Because on the one hand, they've been through very tough in recent weeks, especially in Moscow. But now, before the end is really in sight, they've announced this nationwide vote. I mean, it's a bit risky, isn't it?
It is very risky. Rospotrebnadzor, which is the consumer body in Russia, says no problem, it's going to be absolutely safe. That's why we're staggering the vote over several days. But not many people, I think, are going to be convinced by that. I mean, the reality is, the harsh reality is, that when they postponed the vote, which should have taken place in April, the rate of infection in Russia was far less than it is today. At the moment, 9,000 people every day are catching the coronavirus. Getting close to 450,000 people have the coronavirus infection at the moment in Russia. That's the 3rd highest in the world. And many people doubt the accuracy of those figures as well. It could be much higher. You mentioned the death figure for Russia closing on 5,000. Many people think that's vastly understated. So I think perhaps behind this, too, is a growing fear on the part of the administration in Russia that things could actually get worse than they are at the moment, and that the information about particularly the deaths could start to seep out. And when people start to learn just how bad things really are, it could get worse. 60% of the population of Russia say they've been detrimentally affected financially by the coronavirus. People are getting fed up. 28% people say they're prepared to protest if necessary. Vladimir Putin's fully aware of that. And I think this vote is taking place now largely because he has that in mind.
Rob, thanks very much. Rob Parsons, our chief foreign editor there. Let's have a look at some other world news for you on the programme.